nearby at an altitude of almost 20,000 feet. Sally couldn't wait to have a baby. So, when little Tom was born, she was surprised to realize that she wasn't feeling as happy as she had anticipated. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Since Tom entered the world, she also noticed a lot of weird things happening around her. Finally, one day when she woke up Tom, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Filled with panic, Sally immediately put him in the sink, not quite sure that it would help, but she had to do something. So, while she hated going to the hospital, she had no choice but to bring her baby to one. She never imagined the doctor would react the way he did. When the doctor first laid eyes on baby Tom, he wasn't too worried. There was nothing visibly wrong with the baby, and he silently told himself it was likely just another overly anxious new mother. But Sally insisted there was something seriously wrong with her son, telling the doctor that she had already put him in the sink for a whole day. The physician looked up and started to get a little worried. What exactly did she mean? When he carefully asked Sally if she could explain her reasoning for putting baby Tom in the sink, the doctor could barely believe her answer. But why? What was Sally's reason for leaving her baby in the sink for such a long time? Was she losing her mind? Was tiny baby Tom in danger? Taking baby Tom to his arms, the doctor examined the infant more carefully, quickly finding that there was something very wrong indeed. Tom was born to a deeply superstitious woman named Sally, and even worse, the events surrounding his birth were filled with deep mystic omens. You see, Tom was born over a week later than expected. Sally was distraught, even though the hours following giving birth to her healthy baby boy were fine. Soon, Sally was released to take her baby home with lots of reassurance from nurses that everything was going to be okay. Tom quickly proved to be a very relaxed and stress-free baby, but that didn't stop Sally from watching her baby with an even more paranoid focus than most new mothers. Compared to other babies, Tom was a breeze to care for. He was the very definition of an angel baby. He only cried when he was hungry, and he adjusted to change far quicker than most babies his age. Sally, on the other hand, was anything but fine. She constantly worried that the bad luck created by his day of birth would strike and her precious baby would suffer, or worse, sick of worry. She decided to do some research. Sally searched through her mystical books for any accounts about children like Tom born on Friday the 13th. When her books gave her nothing beyond a line or two about the superstitious meaning of the day, she took to the internet for stories, but there was nothing specific enough. Sally frowned, knowing what she would have to do. The very next day, she took Tom on a stroll through their small town. There was a very special shop she needed to find. Hanging outside a small shop was a sign reading Antoinette's Healing Herbs and Spices, and bearing the same symbol as the one Sally wore on a cord around her neck. Scooping Tom out of the stroller, she tucked him tightly into her arms and stepped into the store, feeling determined. Eventually, she made her way to the book section and began to scan the titles. She scrolled through the rows until she found a binder book that stood out to her. She flipped through the pages, hoping to find possible tales and protections for babies born on Friday the 13th. She bought it and then came home. She was reading through the book, flipping through pages, and didn't realize she had fallen asleep. By the time she woke up from her nap, she felt an unsettling pit in her stomach. She wondered why Tom hadn't woken her up, and she got worried. Something was wrong, she could feel it. Sally crept into Tom's room, her stomach in knots. Getting closer to the crib, she peeked over the edge to check on Tom. From the quiet, she had assumed that he was still asleep, but was shocked to find his wide eyes staring back at her. The baby was still and visibly awake, but something was very wrong. Moving the night-net aside, Sally took a closer look at her son and gasped in horror. Grabbing her son, she headed downstairs and straight into the kitchen. Flicking on the lights, she stared at her smiling baby, her heart pounding. But Tom seemed like his usual happy self. How was he smiling and calm when it was clear that something was very wrong with him? Desperately trying to think of what to do to help her son, Sally made a quick decision. Tom needed to be cleaned. Gently placing her son in the sink, Sally supported his head as she filled it up with warm water. She was at a loss. What could she do to save her poor baby? Sally tried to keep her face and voice calm so she didn't alarm Tom with her worry. Searching through her bag on the kitchen table, she quickly dug out the copy of the book she had bought from the holistic shop the day before. Keeping a careful eye on Tom in the sink, Sally read through the book, finding several cleansing remedies that she thought might help. She took out the ingredients, glad that she kept her cabinet of herbal ingredients stocked up. Mixing together a few lotions, she took Tom out of the sink, gently dried him with a soft towel, and applied the lotions to Tom's skin. But after a few hours, there were no visible improvements despite the promises made in the book. The rash came back even worse. Tom's skin began to look like dry, itchy scales, going red and sore. Soon, Tom's tiny body was covered with the kind of blemishes you saw in horror movies. Sally feared that the curse had finally been activated in her son's life. Soon he was wailing and screaming almost nonstop. Sally tried everything to soothe her son and calm him down, but nothing worked. She covered him in the lotions and gave him ritual cleansing baths, but none of it worked. The only thing that seemed to give him any relief was putting him in the sink in warm water. She couldn't leave him in the sink forever, even though it seemed to be the only thing that made Tom stop crying these days. Sally only really had one option left, and she didn't like it. She was going to have to go outside to take Tom to a doctor, even though it was her least favorite option. Sally had suffered from a strange sickness her whole childhood. The strange symptoms gradually faded as Sally grew older. But now that her son's health was declining rapidly, she worried that she had passed her illness onto him. When Sally finally arrived at the ER with an exhausted but still crying Tom, the receptionist brought her into the doctor's office. Sally nervously began telling the doctor her story. She told him about her childhood and her fears of passing on her strange illness to her son. She made it very clear that Tom had been perfectly fine until just a few days ago. She told the doctor about Friday the 13th and her fear of a curse. She could have never imagined how the doctor would react. When Sally was finally done telling her story, the doctor didn't say anything for a little while. The doctor opened his mouth, but instead of saying anything, burst into uncontrollable laughter. He slapped his leg, and he even cried a little bit. Sally flushed hot with anger and embarrassment, feeling disrespected and hurt by the doctor's reaction. This was why she hated everything about the hospital. She had been vulnerable, desperately seeking help, and was instead going to be laughed at. As a final attempt to get the doctor's attention about just how serious the situation was, she took Tom out of the stroller and lifted up his tiny shirt to show the worst of the reddened and peeling rash. At this, the doctor stopped laughing, quickly realizing that this wasn't some prank that his colleagues were trying to play on him. He now felt terrible, looking at the distraught mother in front of him, quickly putting on a more professional attitude. He gently took Tom from his mother to examine the crying baby, being as gentle as possible and talking quietly to the little boy the whole time. He looked him up and down without saying a word. Then, trying to sound as non-judgmental as he could, he asked Sally what ingredients she had used in her homemade lotions, suggesting that Tom might be slightly allergic to some of the ingredients. Sally showed him the book, and he read through the recipes carefully, seeing nothing that could have caused this type of reaction. Most of them were just good, old-fashioned herbal remedies. He typed something on his computer and wrote something down. All this time, Sally waited nervously for what his conclusion would be. The doctor explained that Tom was suffering from quite a strong case of chickenpox, which would clear up soon enough. But the scaling on the skin and his redness were caused by being constantly submerged in the warm water. The lotions had helped a little but weren't strong enough to soothe both the water damage and the chickenpox. The doctor prescribed a lotion. This one just a more modern and powerful version of the one Sally had been making, and Tom's skin cleared up in a few days. Everything was just fine in the end.